Hello, everybody, and thanks so much for listening to this special mini episode of the On the Safe Side podcast. My name is Barry Botino, and I'm an associate editor with Safety and Health magazine, the official magazine of the National Safety Council. In this episode, I'm joined as always by my colleagues and fellow associate editors, Kevin Drewley and Alan Ferguson, and we're here to give you a preview of the NSC's 2021 Congress and Expo in Orlando. It is our first in-person national convention since San Diego in 2019, and our editorial team is very grateful for the opportunity to be back in person again and to do so as safely as possible. To learn about all the health and safety protocols in place for Congress and Expo this year in Orlando, please visit the event website at congress.nsc.org. That's also where you'll find plenty of information about the various sessions being offered for those of you who are attending in person or via our virtual option, along with info about keynote speakers, our very handy Congress mobile app, and much, much more about the goings-on during Congress from Monday, October 11th through Wednesday, October 13th. And kicking off the mini episode today is Alan to tell us all about day one of the event. So, Alan, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Well, thanks so much, Barry. Naturally, we start with the opening session at 9 a.m. Eastern on Monday, and this year's keynote speaker is Marcus Buckingham, author, consultant, and motivational speaker. Marcus is the founder of the Strengths Revolution. His presentation is titled Resilience, How to Build It in Yourself and Those Who Lead. Marcus will speak about the findings in the, quote, largest global study of resilience yet undertaken, close quote. And that study involved 25,000 workers in 25 countries, quote, all participating in a deep dive into why some people are able to sustain their power and energy while others wane. Also in this keynote, Marcus will describe the 3 key sources of resilience, the 10 questions to measure resilience, and of course, techniques to build resilience in yourself, your organization, and those who you lead. Also during the open session, Kent McElhatton will receive the NSC's Flame of Life Award. The Flame of Life has been awarded just 4 times in 107 years and was last given out in 2013 to the Allstate Foundation. And after the opening session, NSC's Campbell Institute is hosting a forum on the impact to safety culture from various organizational perspectives. Quote, hear how EHS experts from different industries manage changes and ensure positive results, and that begins at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And if you happen to be on the show floor at 1:30 p.m., please stop by the NSC booth for the first ever live podcast taping of On the Safe Side. And technical sessions start a little bit earlier than that at 1 p.m. If you want to find out more information about which ones might be right for you, please go to congress.nsc.org and click on the Education tab at the top. There are educational opportunities under that tab, a virtual live online only schedule, as well as the preliminary program.
Well, thanks, Alan, and we'll follow along now. We'll tell folks about day 2 highlights. That'll get going with the occupational keynote at 8 a.m., featuring remarks from a familiar face to Congress and Expo attendees, Corey Pitzer, the CEO of SafeMath International. Corey's presentation, titled On the Other Side of Safety of COVID-19, Stronger and Safer Than Ever, explores strategies for returning to a more personal, pre-pandemic safety culture while also finding ways to enhance the human touch of virtual team communication that continues for so many amid the ongoing pandemic. At 11 a.m., the annual presentation of OSHA's top 10 most cited violations will take place. Fall protection, general requirements, 29 CFR 1926.501, has been the agency's most frequently cited standard for the past 10 fiscal years, but there were several standards that swapped positions in FY 2020 when data was presented during an exclusive Safety and Health webinar. The format for the presentation of preliminary data for FY 2021 remained in the works at the time of this recording as the Department of Labor limited OSHA staff travel amid the pandemic. We hope you can be part of the audience as data is revealed in Orlando, for it always shapes up as a well-attended seminar. Please keep an eye on congress.nsc.org for further updates and details. Be sure to check the latest program listings for the professional development and technical sessions being offered throughout the day. The show floor is open from 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. with dedicated hours from 9:30 to 2. Also, echoing what Alan said a minute ago, if you happen to be on the show floor at 1:30, please stop by the NSC booth for the second ever live podcast taping of On the Safe Side, going to be there from the show floor both on Monday and Tuesday, and hope you can join us at booth 2525. With that, we'll now pass the baton or conch shell or virtual mic or wherever you want to call it to Barry, who will offer some highlights for day 3.
Well, thank you very much, Kevin. And on day 3, attendees can begin the day with our leadership keynote at 8 a.m. local time. Our speaker is Brian Felco, the CEO of the GTI Group and Jetco Delivery. Brian will discuss 10 leadership principles to ignite your safety performance. And among the topics Brian will cover in his presentation are how to lead change, building organizational safety accountability, and eliminating common safety dysfunctions. And the professional development and technical sessions will go on throughout the day. As for the expo floor, it will open at 9:30 a.m. immediately after the keynote, with dedicated hours from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And before you leave Orlando on Wednesday for home, please make sure to check in to see who wins the NSC Passport to Prizes drawing. That will take place at 11:30 a.m. on the expo floor. Now we want to give you some historical perspective on Congress and Expo, including why the Pfister Hotel in Milwaukee plays such an important role in NSC history. And here's Kevin with a segment we're calling our History Huddle. Take it away, Kevin.
Well, certainly, Barry, and thank you for the introduction and for brainstorming the name of this segment. I know you initially called it a working title, but I truly think it works, period. First, you've got the alliteration end of it, but the huddle part also harkens to Orlando's rich football heritage. Naturally, we think of the University of Central Florida's unbeaten 2017 team, the self-proclaimed NCAA national champions, but let's not forget the ragtag group that descended upon the city 2+ decades before. Of course, I'm talking about the Orlando Breakers, the fictional NFL expansion team featured in the final 2 seasons of the ABC sitcom Coach, when Hayden Fox elected to jump from the cozy collegiate comforts of Minnesota State to match X's and O's with the pros. Now, while Coach Fox might have stayed at the Pfister during a fictitious recruiting trip to Milwaukee, the true significance of the hotel is this. The Pfister was the host venue for the very first NSC Congress and Expo, held from September 30th to October 5th, 1912. This year marks the 8th time Orlando has hosted Congress and Expo, and the first NC event came to town in late October 2012. Now, as we wind down this inaugural edition of History Huddle, and I promise they all won't pay tribute to the filmography of Craig T. Nelson, here's just a quick little nugget about those shows in Orlando. Because the 2020 Tokyo Games were pushed back 1 year due to the pandemic, history accurately can show that 6 of the 8 Congress and Expos held in Orlando coincided with the Summer Olympics contested that same year. So those years would be 1988, the first time the show ever came to Orlando, followed by 1992, 1996, 2000, 2012, and now 2021. The outliers would be 2005 and 2009. So with that, we'll break the huddle until next time. As always, though, a special shout out to NSC Library Manager Elena Kolash for her extensive research and assistance.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this NSC Safety Congress and Expo preview. We hope you can join us safely in person at Orlando's Orange County Convention Center. If not, we hope you can join us virtually. Once again, yours truly, Kevin and Barry, will be recording 2 short podcast episodes live at the NSC booth at 1:30 p.m. both Monday and Tuesday. We also provide coverage of Congress and Expo in our show daily, available at safetyandhealthmagazine.com or your email inbox, so please be on the lookout for that. That's all for now. Thank you once again, and be safe.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to a special live episode of the On the Safe Side podcast here in the NSC booth, number 2525. My name is Barry Bottino. I'm an associate editor with Safety and Health magazine, and with me, as always, the last 20 months during the podcast, my colleagues Alan Ferguson. Hello, Alan.
Hello.
And Kevin Drewley. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Barry.
And we have a special guest from the great state of New Jersey who will interview a little bit later. First of all, I wanted to say thanks again for everybody coming out to the show. It's great to see faces again, and it's great to see people again, and
absolutely.
to fist bump and elbow bump again. We're not to the handshake stage
and
yet.
see each other.
And see each other.
We haven't seen each other.
Do you guys know, Kevin, Alan, do you guys know what the 3 of us were doing on February 14th, 2020? Any
Planning
idea?
Valentine's Day dates.
Yeah,
That's a good answer, but
Dang it.
overeating chocolate.
that's true. We were all doing that as well. But no, that is the first time the three of us were together doing the very first episode of the podcast.
And who was our guest?
Our guest was our special guest today, who we'll introduce in a minute.
Hashtag full circle.
Oh.
Yes. But after 19 more months, we did 19 additional episodes from our homes, apart from each other.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean it when I say it's truly great to see you guys again.
Yes.
Likewise.
So on this episode, we're going to give you guys a little picture into what's going on here in Orlando. It's very sunny here. It's very steamy here. So I'll pass it over to Alan to introduce our special guest today.
Well, I don't know that our guest needs too much introduction, but I will introduce him. Richard Hawk is a well-known and internationally beloved person in the field of safety. He's a Safety and Health magazine columnist, friend of the podcast, motivational speaker, host of the website Make Safety Fun, and what else, Richard? Mother of Dragons? What else do you
I like to play pool.
Oh.
I'm an avid pool player. Yeah,
Excellent.
And I play guitar.
Pool shark?
Yeah. No, I'm not. I can do bank shots, but I wouldn't say a pool shark, but decent.
Pool
know,
guppy?
so-
I don't know.
But and a musician, and I play songs
that's
on my
right,
talks,
yeah.
right? You know, parodies and things like that.
We learned about your love of Jimmy Page in episode 1 of the podcast.
Yes, that's
if you
right.
want to go
Yeah,
back and
yeah,
listen
yep,
to that.
Yep. And I did a PDS, a professional development session on Saturday, and I used Eric Clapton because he's like my second or third.
Sure.
To talk about creating things. So,
Huh.
yeah.
Excellent.
Well, I mean, that segues greatly into the next question. How does it feel to be back in person?
Surreal at first, you know.
Yeah.
I haven't
Ah,
had
there
a
you go.
chance to do 2 different talks before this, so I kind of got broken into the fact that my audience would be wearing masks. Not all of them, but some. And when we did I did the PDS, it felt odd because of everybody spaced out. But it didn't take long before I got used to it, and I was just glad, as were the folks in front of me, that we were able to interact without having a screen in our face. I would much rather be with people with a mask than be sitting at my office with a screen. You know? And just seeing everybody, just being around, it's almost like, you know, when 2 dogs see each other. It's a person. Wait, well, it's the same with this. I was like, oh my God, it's a person that I'm seeing.
Well, hopefully you didn't jump up
Professionally,
on
too, you know?
anybody.
Yeah. So that's what it's been like here. I also was surprised. I always knew it, but I was surprised at the variety. Like, I don't know, for some reason, because I haven't been here for a bit, of the different stuff. Wrangler is here, and I've also seen a change. There's more health stuff than there was, and more stuff about training than in the past. So
Great.
that's what I've noticed so far anyway.
Sounds good.
While we have you here, we also wanted to ask you, just amid this pandemic, how have you seen safety training change, and what challenges do you envision going forward post-pandemic?
Well, obviously it's changed because we're now fairly savvy with Zoom. I've been doing more webinars than I ever did before. And we've also learned to joke about this more. At first, there was not a lot of joking about it. It was just saying like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job.
Right.
Or, you know, and
yeah,
employees
gosh.
too, with stress level, and those who had to work at home that didn't want to work at home, of course. And also, even if you were working, your mind was distracted. And I think distractions is probably the biggest problem that the pandemic has caused. And when we come out of it, it's going to be the opposite too. Just like today and yesterday, it seems strange. So we're a little distracted because we're going back to the way it used to be.
Right.
And even in workplaces that where the employees stayed, you know, frontline, any change, even if it goes from good to positive to negative, is going to make you be more likely to be distracted and have accidents, incidents, and vice versa. And it's like when you get married and you're going to have your honeymoon. You're not thinking about your job, right? You're thinking about something like that, and so you're distracted. So I think as safety professionals, you need to realize that this stress and this change makes folks distracted. That's what they're thinking about.
Yeah.
So there's different things you can do, get tools to help them, like the talk I'm giving in a little bit is on being mindful, how to pay attention, and how to help your employees pay attention. And I think that aspect of safety needs to have a stronger role. Of course, hard hat safety glasses, tying off, group call, all that stuff's important.
Sure.
But this, what I just mentioned, has become more important.
Yeah. Richard, going forward as we kind of look to hopefully a post-pandemic world, what do safety professionals need the most? Do they need support, resources? What do they need the most going forward?
Well, I think they need what we just talked about. They need support either to do it to themselves, for themselves, or they need support with help from other people. It's a tough field in a certain way because we're always looking for problems to solve. I mean, that's what we purposely do. You go out to do an inspection. You're not going out to just to say, hi, how you doing?
Sure.
You're going out there to find problems. And that alone can be stressful. But the fact that now employees are more stressed, and of course you're going to feed off of that, that I think that, I mean, like for myself, I have really worked on eating better and doing some more meditation and just telling myself, doing a cognitive-based therapy kind of thing, where I tell myself regularly that, this is going to pass. This is something that I have to take care of myself with because of it,
Sure.
And that it's not the end of the world, even though we get that message all the time. It's not. Humanity has gone through so many different things, World War II, right, which was horrible.
Yeah.
But the same thing, this isn't as bad as, something like that. So I think being cognitive of that, you need to help yourself and realize that you're going to be distressed and do things to reduce that distress. That's what, especially the safety professional.
Sure.
Especially if they're in the field a lot too. Because I've been reading different books and articles on this subject, and the workforce is upset. Mm-hmm. And it's not our fault. I mean, it's not like the safety professional's fault, but they're just upset because of all this turmoil.
Right. Yeah.
Well, yeah, next we're going to get to a segment called What I Learned Today. And Richard, we're going to ask you, what did you learn today?
All right. What I learned today, particularly, and I really realized that because I met people I haven't seen for a while, quite a few people, and some people I was like, I thought you smiled a lot. I realized how important this bottom part of your face is, because there's a couple people I met.
That's very true.
And I was surprised how much I couldn't tell.
Oh, you can't recognize
No,
people
and like
sometimes.
Barry right now could be sticking his tongue out at me, right? And
How did you know, Richard?
yeah, right. And like I could tell now because of the crinkle in his eyes that he's probably laughing. But I had a friend I met yesterday, who, when I first met her, she's really very upbeat and happy, but she looked like she was mad at me. And so I learned just how much this affects our interactions with it. I also learned that this is really a cool convention. Like I could go to them all the time, but this one I'm working with. Now I'm working with Kelly, but it was Hilda and other folks, and Melissa, which I was so hoping to see her. Who's let me be a columnist for 8 years. I also realized it's cool. It's a cool group to work with. I usually have a really good time here. I don't think I've ever had a bad time when I've come here, and I have had with other conventions. Really, I have had times when.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, they were it's well organized. We did have some glitches, but that's because we have to do this new thing.
Right. Right.
And I also learned that spreading people out during a talk is tough for the speaker.
Sure.
It is, because getting people, I used to love it when people would be close together, standing room only.
Sure.
And I'm going to put in my blog about no standing room only, anymore.
Yeah.
Which, maybe next year it will be. So I've learned quite a few. I think when I go home, I journal regularly, and I think I'll have a lot to put in my journal about today and also on Saturday.
Sure.
Also learned we had the Olympia at my hotel, remember?
Yes, we did.
And I learned that I'm not as buff as I thought I was.
You're slightly less buff than that.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, they could have used me the before and after.
Yeah.
I could have got some money for being the before.
And for folks who don't know, here in Orlando, just before our event came to the convention center was Mr. and Miss Olympia, which, Richard, I'm sure you'll be competing next year, I'm sure.
Yes, that's why because I went to the seminar about being a superstar and, weight bodybuilder.
Sure, sure.
That also will be standing room only.
Right.
Yes. Well, Alan, what did you learn today?
Well, I learned that a lot about resilience from Marcus Buckingham's presentation. I thought it was incredibly fascinating. I loved the kind of answers to the questions and kind of how to build more resilience. I thought it was great. Kevin, what about you?
Learned a good deal about safety culture in the Campbell Institute forum, just talking about, a lot of times we see these pinwheels or these metrics of how to build a safety culture, and while those can be effective, you don't want to just completely try to do too much at once, to latch on to the smaller things. For instance, just even commending someone for a good job. The speaker had mentioned that we so often are quick to look at what may have gone wrong rather than vice versa, and how these things can it really puts the onus on caring about your people and your workers, and showing them that versus just thinking them as a cog in the machine. Also learned the maiden name of our president and CEO, Lorraine Martin.
There you go.
D-U-N-N.
Yeah.
And speaking of presidents and CEOs, I learned, although this was independent research, depending on where you're staying in Orlando, or if you just walked around the convention center, there's someone named Gary Sain, S-A-I-N, and learned that he was a longtime past president of Visit Orlando. And obviously we know we're standing in quite the tourist-centric area, but from what I had read, it sounds like Mr. Sain did quite a lot of legwork to that end. But tragically, in May 2012, from what I read, not long after speaking at a charity event which he had coordinated, fell ill, buckled over, and passed not long thereafter. So, not trying to be morbid, but when you see a name 5-6 times in a place, you're kind of, hey, who is this person?
Yeah. So. Yeah, and I'm sure that's a very influential position he had, for the people here.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I think what I learned today is that I really enjoyed Marcus Buckingham's presentation, and specifically the anecdote about treating your life as a series of swim lanes. He talked about, there may be trouble in lanes 3 or 4, but what can I do in lanes 10, 11, and 12 to make my life better and to make the impact of what's going on in lanes 3 and 4 not so bad. So I thought that was a really interesting anecdote and something I'm willing to share with friends who are going through some tough times or whatnot. I thought that was really interesting. So
that's a good one.
In our first preview episode for Congress, we did introduce the History Huddle, and Kevin is our resident historian and who shared the importance of the Pfister Hotel, and B, a filmography of Coach, the history of the series Coach, Craig T. Nelson's greatness.
Fox.
Yeah,
right.
Which we appreciated.
Yeah.
So we're going to throw it to Kevin again for part 2 of the History Huddle. Kevin, what's your History Huddle today?
Well, to call me the resident historian is far too kind. I was going to wait till the end to give the shout out to Elena Kolash with our Library Services Department.
Absolutely.
But I'm not calling myself a one-trick pony, but really the Excel file that is readily available for folks. I mean, that is if you work for the council.
Don't sell yourself short,
no,
Kevin.
but that's been a wealth of information.
So humble.
But I will hearken to said Excel file. But we're talking today so much about just the greatness and the dare I say magic here in Orlando of being back in person. And before last year with the pandemic, the only other time that this convention had been not held was in 1945, which Richard referenced World War II earlier. So the materials, the speeches that otherwise would have been delivered at the site, which those were the days where it was in Chicago quite a bit in succession, those were just mailed then to members. So I'm pretty sure Elena made the slide. She just joked that's what virtual looked like back in the mid-40s. So
yeah.
They had done that, mailed it, but then the following year it was back at the Stevens Hotel, since we're talking about venues, in Chicago in 46. So really before 2020, that was the only time in the history of the event that it was not held personally.
Do you know how many there's been?
Ask the resident historian.
Yeah,
It's been we just had the centennial of the magazine last year.
Oh, right, okay.
It's going on 100, if not
getting close to 100.
Yeah.
We'll edit this part out.
Wouldn't it be cool? Wouldn't it be cool to have been seen like the first one or two, and then now?
I would feel like it would be a
what
very
we-
small scale event.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
for
like you
sure.
wouldn't like, you know.
Now,
Yeah.
you know, and maybe they didn't even have vendors. You know,
Wasn't
Maybe
one
it was just
wasn't
like-
one of them held in a high school, like Cass Technical High
Yes.
School? I want to
Yeah.
say in
Mhm.
Detroit.
Yes.
You know, like in a gymnasium, I'm guessing. So that'd be interesting.
And now I can brag that I speak, and I've been a keynote a few times at the largest safety convention in the world.
Yes,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can. Absolutely. Well, Kevin, we appreciate the
Well,
huddle.
if I-
Thank you very much for that.
If I may add one more inconsequential
Absolutely.
bit to
Sure,
the
yeah.
Richard also mentioned that he had to get going, and this might sufficiently scare him enough to leave earlier than he wanted to. In a much more minute sense of history, my first time, it's either my first, or it was certainly the most memorable time meeting Richard. It was 2017 in Indianapolis. And he comes by and he's affable as ever, and he visits with Melissa as he says. But what he also does is he gives me this finger puppet,
Oh,
which I creep that this is the part where Richard might run.
And
I
Kevin
don't know.
is, displaying his finger
Oh,
puppet
no,
for
is he?
everyone now.
I needed some desk decor, and
well, I have something special. I've taken it one level up.
Okay.
I've been getting out finger puppets forever, and I have a finger puppet. It's a hand,
Give yourself a
Okay.
hand.
but I also have a finger puppet.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, wow.
That's next level.
That is next
If
Is
you-
level.
that
you
something
folks
That
could
is
see
special
that.
or what?
Yes, a finger puppet of a finger puppet. Love it.
Barry, for you.
Thank you.
like
Thank you,
finger
Richard.
puppet
I
inception.
will cherish that. Thank you. Well, thanks again, Kevin, for the great
thank-
huddle
thank you,
information. We look forward to
certainly.
tomorrow's episode of the History Huddle. Alan, we're going to ask you for a couple of highlights for tomorrow. What's going on here in Orlando tomorrow?
Well, we start with the occupational keynote with the always fascinating Corey Pitzer. His presentation is titled "On the Other Side of COVID: Stronger and Safer Than Ever." And we have this gentleman going to take center stage for our annual presentation of the OSHA's top 10 violations. We also have a Campbell Institute workshop from 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. And we have about 30 plus technical sessions tomorrow. So
Excellent.
Another great day.
I'm looking forward to Kevin, the OSHA Top 10, which is always a good time and always
Yes.
draws a crowd.
Kevin does a fantastic job. So.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
And
we
I,
need to-
it truly is OSHA and Patrick Kappas, and
Yeah.
we'll thank them profusely
yeah.
tomorrow. But we appreciate especially their flexibility in the last, as we've
No.
discussed since February of 20, since we last were together. Basically, several weeks after that, we've appreciated their flexibility in these pandemic times. So.
Absolutely. Richard, you were going to say?
Nothing. I was just listening to you guys.
That's what we hope people do.
Well, we thank you, everybody, for taking a listen to this special episode of On the Safe Side. This will be on our website. You can look at it there. And feel free to check out the other episodes and share the podcast with a friend. We always appreciate it. Spread the podcast as much as possible. For my colleagues, Kevin Drewley and Alan Ferguson, our special guest, Richard Hawk, I'm Barry Bettino from Safety and Health Magazine. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a safe day.
Well, hey everyone. That looks like they invited us back, so that's great. Once again, hello and welcome to the second live podcast of On the Safe Side, or as I'd like to call it, the Buzz Aldrin of live On the Safe Side episodes. You know, still pretty cool, still a great American, and yeah. So with me as always are my fellow associate editors, Barry Bettino and Kevin Drewley, and I'm Alan Ferguson, and we have another great American joining us on the show, and Barry will introduce him now.
Well, thank you, Alan. Appreciate that intro for this live On the Safe Side episode. And not only is Tim Page-Bottorff a senior safety consultant at SafeStart, and we consider him a friend of the podcast,
Oh, yeah.
but he's also got a unique personal resume that I'll tell you guys a little bit about, that I learned about your session the other day. That includes being a break dancer as a younger man, a trombone player, and, in his own words,
Wow.
a longtime Star Wars nerd.
That's me, yeah.
Yep. You've even built your own lightsaber, as a matter of fact.
I have.
Yeah. So being back in person, Tim, again, it makes me recall the wonderful words of Han Solo when he said, "Chewie, we're home."
We're home.
We are home.
So, Tim, thank you for being here. We appreciate you being on the podcast. And how's the show going for you so far?
Show has been great with the sessions and going back and forth and talking and networking with people. It's been in real life. There's no other alternative, and I'm really happy to be here, especially getting a chance to catch up with new people, or old friends, and actually getting a chance to meet new friends. So it's been great. Thank you. And this Han Solo says a bunch of one-liners. And I was just thinking maybe one of the best one-liners he says is, I have a bad feeling about this. And I think what you just said trumps that big time. We're home. Chewie, we're home. So yeah, it feels like we're home.
Yes, it does.
Sticking to that theme, Tim, just you've mentioned it and Barry's hearkened to it, but just what else can you say? How does it truly feel to be back and connecting with folks in person?
The in-person feeling is something that you can't explain virtually. Let me just put that out there right now. It can only be expressed in the eye contact. It can only be expressed through the handshakes or the fist bumps, there's no judging here. Whatever you decide to do, whether it's an elbow or somebody touches you on the shoulder, and that human connection becomes a pretty big deal for me. And that feeling is hard to explain virtually, especially when people ask for their cameras off and they're not having a conversation. Being in person to me is where it's at, and I think the human connection is what drives the engagement. And for an educational event like this, you need the engagement, and I'm really attracted to that. And so I'm glad that we're back here in person, and quite frankly, I'm already looking forward to San Diego. So.
We are as well.
So yeah, I mean, safety professionals may have lost some human contact, some human touch over here the last 18 months, but what may they have gained during this pandemic?
Well, the pandemic has showed us a lot of things. Number one, you don't ever let a bad situation go away until you get the good out of it. And so what we've gained in the pandemic is we've been able to measure our success and resilience, and that you could probably have seen that in the last two keynotes, conversations about resilience and what people can do out of a bad situation, and the innovation that comes out of it. So that's a big deal. Whether we're in person or not, in that regard, we have those folks that are coming in and they see the innovation from the new products, the stuff that's coming out, the award winners. So innovation comes out of the bad stuff, and I truly believe that you now are more flexible in regards to where you can meet. It doesn't matter if it's in person. If you need to meet online, at least you now have that option, and we have proven that option is viable.
Yeah, well said, Tim. Well said.
Question.
So on the podcast, Tim, we're doing a little segment called What I Learned Today. So each day as we're going around the Congress and Expo, we're thinking about what we learned that day. For you, what did you learn today?
There's been a bunch of stuff, which I hope all of you out there are listening, that, if you learn one new thing a day, that's growth.
Yeah.
But there has been a few things that I've learned today. And one of the things that I learned was what Corey said. Corey Pitzer, the keynote speaker this morning, talked about risk paralysis. And the more risk you provide, the more activities that you get involved with safety, the more paralysis you end up having. And I've seen that from complacency to compliance. And the reason why I use this example from learning is that from a compliance perspective, if you provide certain years of training year after year, compliance refresher training drives complacency, which in Corey's words were risk paralysis. And it really made sense to me. So are we pushing the envelope to negative returns on our return on investment, or could we stop at certain areas? So there's only so much you can do, and risk paralysis was one of those big things I learned today.
I think that struck a chord with a lot of people in the room, I think, this morning.
I agree.
I would say the thing I learned today is the OSHA top 10 doesn't change that much, as we know.
Yes.
But one thing, I'm going to be really interested to see where respiratory protection goes as the pandemic wanes.
Yes.
I think that's really what I'm interested in. And I know Patrick Kappas talked about this a little bit with the pandemic going on. We're seeing a lot of respiratory protection citations in healthcare in various organizations, but I'm really interested to see what happens to that number 2 slot in the OSHA top 10.
Agreed.
Yeah. Alan, how about you? What'd you learn today?
Well, I learned from Corey Pitzer, and kind of piggybacking off of Tim here, that kind of the idea that crisis or crises kind of drive innovation and change. And that human beings tend to respond to those challenges by coming up with new innovations, new changes, speeding up the development of things. So I thought that was a very interesting take that he gave. So, and I also learned that Kevin can play the small stage and the big stage.
Yes, he can.
You know,
Absolutely.
so I mean,
You can tell.
I'm waiting for the arena tour next. So,
That remains to be seen.
so what about you, Kevin?
I guess I learned I can play that set for a minute too. And honestly, and I was saying this to Barry before we started, just to ad lib again. I mean, you prepare these notes to give, and it's, I appreciate your guys' candor about it, but it truly is Patrick and his expertise. I'm just a humble moderator, that kind of thing. But no, it was nice just to be there and there and just. What was
the view like up there from the top?
Yes.
What was the view like from the top
of the mountain?
It was okay. It was nice that it wasn't a full house. I think that might have decreased the ad-libbing maybe a little bit. But I also learned from Corey's keynote, just it truly is nice just to connect. He mentioned he had an aside there about depression still is something that is truly on the table for people, even though we're as connected as we ever were technologically. But the fact is that, as Tim said, as we've all said, just to be here on this podcast within, shooting the bull with a microphone or shooting the bull not with a microphone, just connecting with people, seeing people. And
absolutely.
It was a nice anecdote that he gave, so I appreciated what he said.
Absolutely. And Kevin, so we've also started on the podcast something called the History Huddle, and you gave us some delightful responses the last couple of episodes here, including a good question from Richard Hawk yesterday. So give us today's version of the History Huddle.
Okay, can and will do. Well, first we'll harken back to Richard's Stump the Band question. This marks the 109th NSC Congress and Expo.
Wow, excellent.
Thanks for looking that up.
Oh, sure. So we were
just
again,
caught off guard by that.
It wouldn't be a History Huddle without a shout out to Elena and the good old Excel file.
It's always the easy question.
Right.
Sometimes.
Yes.
Although we were getting warmer in as much as we said, well, the magazine's over 100.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
more than 100.
I mean,
But no, I've got a couple little items. First is related to Patrick Kappa's involvement. So as we mentioned during the show, this is his 11th time. He came aboard doing this in 2011. I always remember this grade school math axiom where when you're connecting years, you would subtract the years and then add one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I'm saying that. But at any rate, it's been...
That's tomorrow's what I learned today.
Right. Yeah. It's been... not that there's anything beyond sheer coincidence, but it's been fall protection again for those same 11 years. So every year that Patrick has been kind enough to lend his time and expertise, it's been fall protection. So saw that the most recent time it was in 2010 where his colleague Thomas Gelassi presented, and it was scaffolding that was number one.
Okay.
On those days. So fall protection was number 2.
That's a great trivia question.
Sure.
What was number one before fall protection general requirements took over?
And something else, and Patrick, if he's listening, I noticed that a couple standards related to electrical, just general requirements and wiring, those were in the top 10 in 2010. And again, we talk about the more things change, the more they seem the same. Would have to look that up, but it's been a while since we've seen those electrical standards, at least in the few years I've been with the council. So that could be something we might get insight from Patrick, just kind of has that improved? How has those hazards been mitigated? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I don't want to bogart the mic. I will say that we've had this coach theme. So in wrapping up the History Huddle, I looked up.
For Tim's benefit, our first episode was a Craig T. Nelson filmography from Kevin about Coach and his work in Orlando.
Yeah.
So.
In the later seasons of.
Did you ever talk about poltergeist in that conversation, or was it just Coach?
No, but we absolutely could.
Okay.
We could talk about Parenthood. We could talk about
Blades of Glory.
Right. But no, there were in the final season 9 of the acclaimed sitcom Coach, there were 5 episodes with Orlando in the title, including each of the last 3, which was Leaving Orlando, parts 1, 2, and 3.
Oh, it's a
And
three-parter.
three-parter, wow.
Three-parter. And the
Dang.
final 2 parts aired on May the 14th of 97. And I vaguely remember some of it, the wonders of Roku. And you're probably thinking likely story with how much I'm sounding like a fool talking about it, but it's fun to revisit some of that stuff.
Absolutely.
I honestly kind of gave up on the show when they went to Orlando. I thought they kind of jumped the shark.
Yeah.
But
possibly.
Revisiting it in Roku, it's not so bad.
So that was Craig T. Nelson's Fonzie moment then?
You might say.
Jumping the shark, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Kevin, for the History Huddle. Appreciate you digging into the history there. Alan, tell us a little bit about some highlights for Wednesday here at Congress and Expo.
Yes, we have a shortened day, but still kind of action-packed with a leadership keynote from Brian Falco, the CEO of GTI Jetco Delivery. His presentation is titled 10 Leadership Principles to Ignite Your Safety Performance, and that's in the Valencia Ballroom at 8 in the a.m. Tech sessions begin at 10 a.m., and there's about 20 plus of those, and I believe all three of us are going to be moderating one, at least on
That's
the schedule,
correct.
so
Yes.
That's correct.
be on the lookout for that. You might get lucky. You might have us as a moderator. You might not. That's a roll of the dice. So,
I got a history question for you. What year did Brian get the DSSA?
here did Brian get the DSO?
That's okay.
No,
I put
yeah.
you on
Was
the
that-
spot. It was the
Yeah.
same year that I did. It was 2018.
Oh.
2018, okay.
2018 in
Gotcha.
Houston, yeah.
In Houston, that was my first Congress. So
Yeah, it was a good
great,
time.
excellent. Yeah. Well, again, thank you folks for listening in today. We appreciate it. We are live here at Congress and Expo. We appreciate everyone who
Yes.
listens in. Thank you so much, Tim Page-Bottorff,
bet.
for being
Yeah,
here.
thank you.
Thank
Love
you
it.
to my colleagues,
Tim.
Kevin Drewley, Alan Ferguson, and that will end today's episode of On the Safe Side. Thank you for listening.
Bye, folks.
Thanks, everybody.